Hello, I'm Zachary Tyler, and this is my presentation on the growing stigma surrounding the unhoused population and its causes. To start, I'd like to give an introduction to my topic. The original reason why I picked this topic was because one day when I was out driving through Douglas County where I live, I saw a sign that said handouts don't help, and it frustrated me at first. And I started doing research and I started looking into it. I realized that this was a program that was rooted in stigmatization, and even if they claimed to have these good intentions, it actively empowered stigma and made it worse for houseless people. There are many reasons why these stigmas occur among the unhoused populations, and the main ones I'll be covering in this presentation are substance abuse, trauma, and mental illness. To start, I'll talk about substance abuse. Substance abuse in this population often stems from the fact that not many other treatments are available to them, and they often find themselves retreating to substance abuse as a way to treat themselves and treat various illnesses and various problems that they may have. Drugs in the United States are a lot easier to find than a reliable health insurance and a way to afford that health insurance, and so a lot of times houseless people will find themselves getting into substance use, or they already had a problem with substance abuse and it makes it worse once they become homeless and they're still addicted to the substance. A study done on substance use and the houseless population reports that 77% of homeless people struggle with substance abuse disorder of some sort. Now, another thing I'd like to mention is that the city of Denver pushes the stigmatization on houseless people. Anti-homeless laws have always been a thing, but in recent times they've been growing, and I know I'm not the only one who's noticed this. In 2012, Denver passed an urban camping ban, and the Denver police are eager to enforce this bill, doing things like homeless sweeps and overall just treating houseless people with poor treatment. And another thing I've noticed just personally is that public restrooms are very hard to come by in areas where the houseless population is high. Oftentimes they just won't let you use their restroom unless you're a paying customer, and I think that it is a very poor business model and often harms houseless people. One of the main causes of the stigmatization that I had mentioned earlier was trauma, and I'd like to touch on that more because houseless people, many of them suffer with post-traumatic stress disorder, and a study done on trauma in this population reported that 62.9% of houseless people have dealt with childhood physical abuse in their past, which is obviously a very traumatic thing to deal with and leads to PTSD most likely. Another thing I'd like to mention is that many war veterans end up without a home after they do service, and they're traumatized from this war and they have no way to get help, and I think that that also leads into that substance use that we were talking about a couple slides earlier. Trauma and substance abuse in the houseless population go hand in hand, just like I mentioned earlier. One kind of thing I wanted to mention was the normalization of hostile architecture. I had a video here, but it passes over the limit of what we are allowed to show, so I'm not going to include it in the presentation. But if you don't know, hostile architecture is something that is designed to make it hard for loitering to be done, and in cases like this, it makes it hard to sleep on public streets, public benches, anything where you usually see houseless people sleeping. There is most likely a hostile architecture version of it, and this was just something that I wanted to mention because it is a result of the stigmatization around homeless people, and it does not need to exist. But it also shows how the government dislikes homeless people and likes to poorly treat the unhoused population. And one thing I wanted to mention was, sorry, excuse me, I lost my train of thought. The third big thing that I wanted to mention as the causes for this stigmatization is mental illness. And a study done on the houseless population found that 22% of the people in this study suffer from chronic mental illness. And this study is old, and as resources become more widely available to get things like diagnoses, this number is definitely a lot higher. And one thing I wanted to touch on was schizophrenia, because a stereotype among houseless people is that they suffer with schizophrenia, and this stigma is harmful. This stereotype is harmful to both people with schizophrenia and the unhoused population. Oh, excuse me. Another thing I wanted to mention, just kind of in tandem with the first slide I had on the relevance, is that handouts do help, and helping your community is a great way to better things and better the stigma around homeless people, and spreading love and kindness will never be futile, no matter what the police force says in Douglas County, and no matter what the Denver police say about helping others. Handing out cash or food or water or resources like clothes will always be helpful, just in the fact that they are a kind act. This is my BPSC map, and I'll start from the top left corner with the internal individual. PTSD in the houseless population is commonplace, and on top of not having a place to live, a lot of times the unhoused population is dealing with a lot of dangerous mental illnesses that can kind of keep them trapped in their head and make it a lot harder to get out of the situation they're in. In the top right corner, I have the external individual box, and I think it's just the thing about this whole stigma and this whole situation with the unhoused population is that you can see it just by walking through this very city, and just by looking at how these people are treated. They're ignored, they're treated like aliens, like they're not a part of this community, and like they're not citizens of the same city that we live in, and they should be treated just the same. In the internal collective corner, I wanted to mention how the stigma around homeless people can easily be internalized and cause for more mental pain, leading to a collective stigma punishment on them, and leading to stereotypes that can harm themselves and make it a lot harder to get out of their situation. In the bottom right corner, I have the external collective, and I think that the government does their best to act like they are trying to help homeless people, but not much is done. And while there are a lot of communities like homeless shelters that do help this population a lot, I think that the government could be doing a lot more, and they're not doing as much as they could. Whereas on the other hand, the smaller communities like homeless shelters and people who go around helping homeless people and giving people places to live and helping out, that's where a lot of the positivity in this situation can be found. And I think this whole situation is very grassroots, and the best way to get better is to help out in the best way you can. The conclusion here is that these stigma around the unhoused population are rooted in many different directions, and all these different causes lead to different stigma and different problems that the homeless population has to face. And a big takeaway I think everyone should learn from this is that there are many laws that restrict this population, and these laws come from the stigma. And so by educating yourself and educating others, this stigma can be reduced, and in turn it can help people who may be in a situation where they don't have a home. It can help them get into a a better headspace, and overall better the outlook for homeless people, and in turn lead for government action to better themselves and better their treatment as well. These are my references. Thank you so much for listening. I know a lot of this was kind of sporadic and out there, but I appreciate you for taking your time to listen to this whole presentation, and I hope you learned a thing or two, and I hope coming out of this presentation you will look at the unhoused population in a different light and maybe do your best to fight these stigma. Thank you so much.